Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains, majesty above the fruited plain. America, America, God shed his grace on thee, and crown thy good with brotherhood, from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for heroes prove in a liberating strife, who more than self their country love, and mercy more than life. America, glorified till all success, yes, be nobleness and every gain divine. America, sweet land America, God shed his grace on thee and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Quite a Sunday, Reverend Scott. How are you going to follow that up?
That's a mighty good question, Reverend Anya. I have absolutely no idea. Oh, I have some idea. God shed her grace on thee. The letter is death dealing, but the Spirit gives life. So shall we gather at that river, and there swear we will not dishonor our souls with hatred. We do gather in this sanctuary, daring to invoke the name of the holy, to assuage our fears and those of our neighbors, and hopefully to find a way to, as Dr. King said, to make a way out of no way. In the name of love, I ask us, what is going on in our nation and in our culture? This is that time of year when we normally have these reflections, being close to Independence Day. It seems more poignant than normal this particular weekend. And this first service in July always comes right after the Unitarian Universalist holds its General Assembly, where many of us were representing our faith, exercising our fifth principle, which honors the democratic process in our congregations and in society at large. And so maybe one of these ways out of no way is remembering that our way of doing congregational life, where we have a voice in what happens, everything from the ministers you choose to the money we raise and spend. This democratic process was the seed that blossomed into American democracy. How a people is governed is a vital avenue for our theological reflection. Today's sermon title comes from Oscar Wilde, the great playwright, who in his very cheeky way wrote, "Perhaps America was never really discovered, merely detected." America is indeed not discovered, it is made, co-created by every one of us every day. Sometimes what we are co-creating seems new. Sometimes we merely think it's new, but we're actually putting in a new boss who seems a lot like the old boss. Sometimes what we co-create, it seems like we're heading towards that promised land of inclusion and diversity. And sometimes we witness a turning back to what most here would regard as unenlightened thought and policy. And so as we gather today, looking towards Independence Day, many of us are feeling the America that we have helped to co-create is under threat, altered in ways that we are finding unacceptable. And I invite us to admit that concern to ourselves and to one another, especially our sorrow and our despair. I invite us to feel that completely. One cannot reach the mountaintop unless you take a long journey through the valley. We are sensing that things we deeply value are endangered, and this time is worthy of our emotional engagement, so do not rush past your lament. I can't keep from crying sometimes. It is the lament that will assure that we will remember, that we will refocus. So when we look up with hope to restore and amplify the values upon which human thriving is contingent, the memory of the pain that we feel this week will fuel our return, restoring the kingdom of truth as we understand it to be. And together on this weekend, we wonder, what America are we co-creating right now? One might say our nation is allowing itself to forget hard-won lessons of the past. Lessons about international cooperation, lessons against greed, about the dangers of fascism, lessons paid with millions of lives. Some say the burden of being the world's #1 superpower has worn thin and diminished our resolve to remain central to world peace and order. Some seem to think that we're becoming more greedy, foolishly believing we could have done better all along without some of the international institutions that tried to prevent our world from falling into complete world war over the last 70 years. NATO, the United Nations, etc. And far from perfect as they are, these institutions kept armed conflict from consuming the globe in the nuclear age. Today, many of our fellow Americans seem willing to trade our old dance of compromise for a different kind of attitude towards the world. We are encouraged to be motivated by greed instead of compassion, to embrace nationalism instead of the wider notion that we are all part of the one and only human race. Even our own institutions like the Senate and the Supreme Court seem to be licensing division, to have become hyper-partisan, and ignore the higher truth that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the greedy one. I criticize this new so-called ethic not because I say so, but because the world's great religious traditions have been telling us this for thousands of years. Consider what's happened in the last few weeks that directly opposes major ethical teachings the world over. Family separations at our borders, an immigration policy contradicting what the Judeo-Christian Bible says about 100 times in its scriptures. Be kind to the stranger, for you were once a stranger in the land of Egypt. We have watched on television as children were used as tools in a cynical ploy for political gain. And how do we see that as anything but evil? We were taught, were we not, to be kind to the widow, the poor, the sick, the orphan. Even the Southern Baptist Convention, not known for its progressivism, passed a resolution just this May calling for immigration reform that maintains the priority of family unity. Their measure calls for providing a pathway to legal status for undocumented immigrants already living in the country. This passed on a near unanimous vote of the almost 10,000 delegates in that hall. They wrote, "We declare any form of nativism mistreatment, or exploitation as inconsistent with the gospel of Jesus Christ. This from the very people who put this regime in power. We saw this week another Supreme Court decision that attacked and diminished workers' rights. And we also saw perhaps the most confounding decision in decades in the decision to affirm an indefinite travel ban on some majority Muslim countries. So to talk about this particular event, I turn us towards both the Bible as well as American jurisprudence. First, Supreme Court precedent. In our legal system, one must have compelling evidence, the effects of new legislation, a big change in culture, or a constitutional amendment to overturn earlier rulings. This is why a really bad court decision is dangerous. It can often take a century to undo. In her bold dissent to Tuesday's unfortunate decision, Sonia Sotomayor decided to read her dissent aloud from the bench. This rarely happens. Sotomayor did this to send a message to the other justices and to her nation that the decision made was out of bounds with current legal theory and even endangered setting a course for legal segregation. Sotomayor cited the case known as Korematsu. She drew parallels between Tuesday's decision and Korematsu, which was the 1944 ruling that upheld the detention of Japanese Americans during World War II. As here, the government invoked, she writes, an ill-defined national security threat to justify an exclusionary policy of sweeping proportion. As here, the exclusion was rooted in dangerous stereotypes about a particular group's supposed inability to assimilate and to desire harm to the United States. Justice Sotomayor intoned from the bench that the court redeploys the same dangerous logic underlying Korematsu and merely replaces one gravely wrong decision with another. The great jurist remained resolute, and she condemned the ban as harrowing and motivated by hostility and animus toward the Muslim faith. She proceeded to read into the record dozens of public statements by this president that made it clear why he wanted this ban: religious bigotry. Indeed, every other court that heard this same evidence found it was clear from the president's statements that the ban had little to do with national security and everything to do with filling a vapid campaign promise to ban people of a certain faith from entry into our nation. The court's majority clinical defense of the Muslim travel ban cited the president's executive authority, something Kennedy and the other conservatives have frequently sought to check. Not this time. In so doing, they made the mistake the Apostle Paul warns about in our reading. You've heard 1 Corinthians 13s at weddings, the love is patient, love is kind. That's 1 Corinthians. It seems the folks in Corinth didn't get that, so he had to write them another letter. And he warns them that the letter of the law is death-dealing. It is the Spirit that gives life. And he wrote this because they were in deep conflict. They were using the law as a cudgel against one another instead of acting out of something greater, the spirit of love. Paul's injunction is meant to remind us that those in power should look beyond technical justifications and instead consider the broader impact and social consequences. With this ruling, the Supreme Court has effectively affirmed the first racial religious ban on entry to the United States since the lifting of such quotas in the 1960s under President Johnson. This is what happened this week. We are handed a focus on the fine print, letters that deal death and we are right to feel mourning. Brothers and sisters, siblings, we thought we understood the progress and advance of American liberty. Many of us grew up honoring as scripture proclamations in our nation's founding documents. This is what Reverend Forrest Church calls America's civic religion. It's based on notions of the divine. And these words, they mean a lot to us. Our civic religion is best encapsulated in the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal, that all are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These recent court rulings against workers, immigrants, and Islam fail mightily to live up to those ideals. Indeed, religious liberty was the very reason that this nation was founded the way it was, freedom of and freedom from religion. It's why religion is the subject of the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. Mormons and Catholics, Lutherans and Jews, Unitarians and Muslims, all are endowed by our Creator with inalienable rights, meaning no governmental power ever is justified in taking them away. And these rights, this document reminds us, don't just come from one another. They come from something beyond us, from what I'm willing to call the Almighty. No person can rightly take away what God graciously gives. So here's something we can do in our mourning. Seek out our Muslim neighbors, family, and co-workers. Let them know they can count on us to stand for them, to show up and defend them if they need us. Same with any undocumented people you know. Let them know we are people they can count on. Reach out to folks of all marginalized communities, Black folks, Native Americans. Work with them. Let them know that white nationalism is afoot and it is emboldened, and we will not allow it to prevail. Ask them how best to be of support, how best to serve the good with our witness and our power and our privilege, and follow their advice. Tell them this is not acceptable, and share that there are entire communities like the one you find yourself in today, dedicated to their liberty and their protection. And if you can bear with me, I invite you into one more form of witness. Share time with those in your circles who may actually think the last few months have been good for this country. Unless it is unsafe to be around them, do not cut them off. Don't further shred our social covenant by denying them table service or peace of mind at a movie or a gas station. Please stay in relationship. Be kind, but witness to the truth. Calmly, simply proclaim our values. Those values to be kind to the stranger, to protect the poor, the widow, the orphan, the sick, the elderly. Remind them that migration from misery and violence is not a crime, that women are in charge of their bodies, that workers have rights. Remind them of their best selves, of America's best self. So to help you start that conversation, some of you might have noticed there were some flag pins to pick up on the way in. I encourage you to wear those pins if you're so inclined to provoke a meaningful, loving conversation about our values. I know we cannot all do this, but I encourage us to try. Sharing your dreams of a nation that honors all manifestation of humanity, regardless of passport, religion, whom one loves, what one calls holy. The way we establish justice, remember, is always inseparable from the justice that gets established. It is not all right to use the same destructive, death-dealing methods and tactics used by those who wish to shrink the promise and protection of America. This week, claim the America you know is and that you know should be. Act the way we wish those who oppose us would act, with love, grace, decency, invitation. To sustain you in this, I urge you to find and revel in your joy. To play, to let that cat of yours talk you into a nap. To spend time eating with friends. And to feel deeply what is moving through you in this time. A new paradigm begs our invention. It does seem in moments our institutions have failed us, but we're not quite there yet. So we prepare with prayer and song, deed and sweat, care and wisdom, and embodied community. And I leave you with this challenging question. By definition, are we now the conservatives? Is it not we who are standing up and say, don't change that? Singing of the expansive inclusion of multi-ethnic humanity, we mean a given upon which the entire system is built. Human dignity. It's inalienable. We proclaim that it's unholy to stray from a wide embrace of the entire human family, regardless of border, love, prayer, party, posture, or pain. Our liberty begins at birth, nay, at the dawn of time itself. And our liberty ends where we oppose ourselves on one another's liberty. And we have shown time and again that with the majority of our neighbors and fellow citizens, we will honor these rights, these rock-ribbed truths. So one answer to how we do this is don't try to do it alone. Especially here at the U. Our theme for next year will be connections. Connections within, without, among, and between. Everything we put our energy behind should be co-sponsored. There should be no group, committee, team, board, or other function here that's all by itself, solo. Model the collaboration that is the remedy to tyranny and division. Become one another's accomplices for the journey. Find your grateful heart and devote yourself to our mission. And ask yourselves this week, are we now the conservatives, the guardians of truth, demanding loving minds and wise hearts rule our day, that ancient ideals be upheld? Are we not the ones proclaiming the most precious innovations of our republic be protected? Freedom of religion, speech, press. Are we not the champions of the advance of restorative justice? Are we not those who care for one another every way we can find? We don't care whether the person we care for deserves it. We see pain and we want to help end it. We see tyranny and we want it to stop. So I challenge you to wear your flag pin and inspire folks with your telling of the America that is and should be. We co-create this land. It's yours and it's mine as we show our love for one another in new ways every day. So let us sing that great tune from old Woody Guthrie. In Woody Guthrie's day, he taught that music can conquer fascism. Here's praying that that power has grown over the years.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New more time, this land. This land.
So remember that the letter is death dealing, but it's the spirit that gives life. Swear you will not dishonor your soul with hatred, and gather at the river, so America, God can shed her grace on thee. And always remember, we are united by a love that won't let us go, won't let us down, and will not let us off the hook.
Yes. Amen. Let's sing our closing words as we extinguish our chalice.